Here we go. So what does democracy look like, right? This is a chant that you see on the streets. You know, this is what democracy looks like. So what does democracy look like? If you talk about democracy as strictly defined, direct democracy, that means that every citizen votes on every issue, and they're allowed to vote on every issue, and sometimes they have to, as sort of part of their duties as citizenship. Now this works for small communities. It works for communities where the people empowered to vote are only a small portion of the community, like the aristocrats or something like that. But it doesn't scale well. So when we had issues of scale where you need nationwide sort of democratic-ish governments, you solve that with a republic. So we elect people who then ride on horseback to their local capital. Do they do that anymore? And then we trust them to vote for us. And they do whatever they want, and occasionally we vote them out, maybe. Now, of course, recently it's kind of evident that this strategy has some serious problems that are systemic. So for one, they're premised on this idea of like a sage representative who's going to be wise and consider every issue and not be as affected by the day-to-day politics or fads or social trends as the plebs on the street like you. But I think we can see that that's clearly not the case. The most sage representatives that we have in Congress right now are able to think about 4 years away. Because that's when their re-election date is. You don't get people very often making plans that will be much more beneficial to us in, say, 50 years, but not so much in the next 4 years, where they'll be criticized for spending some capital investment, like, for example, NASA, right? Like, NASA would be a lot cheaper if they had a capital investment up front instead of doing things every 2 years or whatever it is, and that way they have to have a higher overall budget. Another problem with it is a question of who do they really represent, which is, typically around 52% of their constituents, maybe a bit more, and increasingly even less, because more and more representatives are really representing a few smaller entities that have higher amounts of power. So rich people, corporations, etc., have a disproportionate amount of power. They have way more power than you, right? You don't have $1 million to throw at their campaign. You don't have $1 million to put on a independent advocacy about their campaign. And so you get just a lot less representation. And that's assuming that you even voted for the person in the first place. If you didn't, tough shit. They get to use your vote anyway. And then there's also just the question of, one person running things on all possible issues just doesn't really work, because to do that, you need to have such a broad range of experience, right? Like, if you think about it right now, suppose you work for a think tank like the ACLU, right? And if you're a strategist or you're a policy wonk and something like that, you can concentrate on, at most, like 2 fairly specific issues, right? Like privacy, perhaps. However, a representative currently, they have to vote on every single issue. And it's a joke that they read every bill that comes before them at all, let alone analyzing in depth, let alone understanding the issues enough to form a considered opinion. That just doesn't happen. It's a nice hypothetical, but it's just not true. So liquid democracy is kind of a fusion between direct democracy and representative democracy in this sense, where to start with, you have all the power that you would in a direct democracy. So if you want to, you can vote on every single issue that comes up. However, you also have the option to delegate your vote, and your delegates have the option to delegate your vote further. So suppose that you're not all that involved in day-to-day politics, but your friend Alice is. Alice can in turn take your vote and delegate it to, say, the ACLU for civil issues, to the EFF for electronic issues, to the NRA for gun issues, whatever, right? Assuming that you trust Alice to simply have sort of similar worldview, similar ideology to you, that's all that you need. And if all her votes are reported to you, all her ways of using your vote are reported to you, before they take effect, you can always override them, you can always change the proxy, then you don't lose anything in this. You just gain the convenience. And then furthermore, Alice doesn't need to, research every single act that comes up, find out what's the next SOPA PIPA, right? That's the ACLU's job. And the ACLU in turn delegates that to, some lawyers and whatnot to actually analyze every single piece of legislation. And so the experts can have true basis of support, but collectivize power. Now, you might say, well, this is a nice theory. How are you going to do this? So first off, it's already being done to a certain extent. The pirate parties in Europe, particularly, although there are some U.S. pirate parties as well, are starting to do this, and they're starting to make real headway. There are a couple politicians in the U.S., Jeremy Hansen in Vermont and Phil Dodds in Florida, who are running on a platform of direct representation where they say that if enough of their constituents vote to tell them to vote a certain way, they'll vote whatever way their constituents tell them to vote. Interesting concept, actually doing what your constituents want. Now, I run a project called Make Your Laws. We are incorporated. We are 3 corporations, in fact. We're a 501c3, a 501c4, also known as like an advocacy organization, and 527, also known as a PAC, specifically a hybrid super PAC. So you've heard of super PACs. I'll get to that in a second. I run one. And our goal is to do this sort of in a graduated fashion. The first thing that we're starting with is financing in a democratized way for voter initiatives at the US state level. So right now it's kind of difficult to find out exactly how to donate to support gay marriage or to oppose abortion or whatever, right? Like whatever your political issue is. There are initiatives that are on the ballot, but it's not really organized in one way. And all of the sites that are out there are fairly much partisan only. So for example, Act Blue exists, and that's exclusively for like specifically democratic issues. So that's what we're starting with. We are completely nonpartisan. For that matter, so I may as well mention our principles. We're committed to being nonpartisan, fact-based discussion, so you're allowed to have your own opinions, but if you make an empirical claim on our website, we reserved the right to fact-check it and to highlight it if it's iffy. Security, privacy for our users, which is in some respect in tension with the next one, which is transparency. And finally, we're nonprofit. So all of our code is open source. Our discussions are, for the most part, open, except for a few small things or a few sensitive issues that we do in the core team, and so forth. So it's all hacker-friendly run. Now, once we do this issue of financing for voter initiatives, how do we expand? For one, expanding to candidate-level financing, PACs and so forth, to different jurisdictions, so federal as well. Right now, we're talking with the FEC. In fact, like 2 days ago, I was on the phone with FEC lawyers for an hour, talking about some issues that we have that we need their opinion on. We're going to expand to getting ballot initiative signatures. So for example, we want to make it possible for you to sign a ballot initiative in your state instead of just by happening to walk across someone who's getting paid $1 to $4 a head, who's standing around on a street corner in downtown. We want to make it so that you can just go to our website, click or prove your identity to us in some way, and there are various ways we can do that. Possibly, depending on state law, we might have to require you to print out a form, physically sign it, scan it, and then give us that, just because of the bullshit of the laws, but I can go into that if you're interested. But literally, that may be what we have to do in some cases. But one way or another, there's always workarounds, right? So we're going to make that happen. Ultimately, we'd like to be international. So my knowledge legally is US-based, so I can't answer questions about international law and so forth, but we're very much interested in expanding. So the policy discussion system, the internal voting system, that would be liquid democratic, of course, et cetera, that I think all internationalizes just fine. The part where you get legal issues is like financing and stuff like that. What else? So a few points of legal background. There's a court case recently in California called Nee versus Slocum, which is a company called Vera Firma, run by a guy named Nee, sued California to require them to accept digital signatures. The appeals court, they lost. The appeals court sustained, saying that the law in California says specifically that you have to affix it personally, as in using a pen on paper to sign a voter initiative ballot petition. Ballot, whatever, yeah. So on the other hand, in Utah, there was another recent case, Anderson versus Bell, which said that they can accept online electronic signatures. So there's going to be this tension. We're probably going to have to sue a few states to get this done, but you know, we can do that. There's an interesting few issues with super PACs. You've probably heard of them. So if I'll open it up to questions in a sec, but you know, broadly, super PACs are things that can accept unlimited contributions so long as the contributions are spent in a way that's not connected, or not coordinated rather, with the candidate. So if you run an ad saying, you know, Obama for president 2012, and you don't talk to the Obama campaign about your advertising strategy, you can accept unlimited donations to fund your ads. Whereas if you gave money to Obama, you can only give him around $5,000. There's some intricacies there, but roughly that. Whereas for your thing, you can accept, you know, $1 zillion. And if you do that for a 501c4, you don't have to say who gave you the money. You can, like Carl Rhodes, right? Rhodes, yes. Runs Crossroads GPS. That's a 501c4. It launders money for his PAC, which is American Crossroads. And American Crossroads is a PAC, so they have to report dutifully. We got $4 million from a Crossroads GPS. Well, who gave it to Crossroads GPS? Fuck you, we don't have to tell. So we're working on fixing that. But it's an interesting legal context. And then there's other legal issues, like someone proposed that we accept Bitcoin. There's issues with anonymous contributions of commodities under FEC rules. And there's also issues potentially with FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network in the US, about whether, you know, trafficking in Bitcoin is money laundering per se, or like, is it currency, is it a commodity, is it a security, et cetera. If you're interested, we can talk about that. And there's some interesting problems just overall. So we have the need to identify people by their legal identities. We would allow people to have pseudonyms. If you want to just talk on the website, if you want to act as a proxy, you can be not identified to us at all. You can be an organization, not a human at all. Like the ACLU would be welcome to make an account on our website and to act as a proxy. Likewise, you know, if you want to pull something where you create a new pseudonym and that pseudonym becomes a political blogger, but you don't want to reveal that it's you, that's fine by us. We would only require your legal identity if you're giving us money, basically. Or if you're giving money through us. So there are legal requirements, we comply with the law. There's issues with cryptographically proving that the votes are correct without revealing who voted for what or who used which proxy, or revealing to a proxy who is proxying to them. So there's, you know, privacy preserving proof. If you're a cryptographer, let's talk. There's issues with, you know, tracking the honesty of your proxies, so that if they misuse your vote, you know, and then you can just rescind your proxy. And they never had any effect, they lose social standing, and there's no reason for them to do so. This also prevents vote trading, because you can say, you know, I trust Bob to vote for me on gun rights issues, but fuck no, I'm not allowing him to, you know, vote for me on abortion. And that way, you know, if Bob wants to trade your vote, for a gun rights thing, for a vote on abortion, he can't, because he doesn't have the ability to spend your vote on an abortion-related issue. So there's some nice things there that just plug certain holes that you're probably thinking of in liquid democracy. There's issues of sort of just policy authorship in general. So we need to run sane public fora. Trolling, of course, is going to be an issue that we're going to have to moderate. I think there are interesting ways of going about that through the proxy system, where, for instance, you can have a pseudonym, but if you're not proxying at least one vote, we can suppress you by default, because maybe you're a sock puppet. And you should be able to proxy at least one vote by default, namely your own, right? There's no reason not to give your own pseudonym your vote. So that should not be a problem, and it's an easy way to quell certain basic trolling. And then there's just like, how do you jointly author a law so that people don't feel like too connected to it that personally, such that, you know, they're offended when people want to make changes, and so that it doesn't just crazily branch out such that you can't really collectivize it and bring it down again. So there's very interesting problems there of just collective authorship. And one of those problems, of course, is you're not going to have a single internet-wide law, right? There might be some issues that virtually all of our users agree on, like most of the stuff that EFF is involved with, simply because that's so tied to just like the existence of our site itself that, you know, why would you be on it if you didn't support open access to government records, for instance, that are necessary to do this. But for a lot of things, it's not going to be the case. So abortion, for example, gay rights, I don't know, gun control law. These are things that vary very significantly jurisdiction to jurisdiction. We don't take a position on it, and we would do sort of a lazy forking policy, where if there's a significant disagreement, fine, you can each have your own proposal, you split it, and what's needed to pass it in a given jurisdiction is just enough critical mass backing a given policy within a given jurisdiction. It's not like everyone worldwide has to agree on the one true gun rights policy. So yeah, I realize this is sort of a sketch, but I wanted to make this a little more conversational than the usual 20-minute talk. So I'm opening for questions. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'd like to address them. Yo.
The basic premise of the idea of being able to delegate a vote seems really great, but it seems like it might ultimately kind of lead us back to where we are now, like at scale. Like,
right.
This would work great right here at this campus. I could delegate my vote to you, but on a scale of millions, doesn't that just make special interest groups become elected representation?
Okay, so that's a fair criticism. So doesn't this just make special interest groups be the new politicians, or doesn't this devolve to what we have now? So I'll say right off, the worst case scenario for a liquid democracy is what we have now. Now, I should point out, I am not aiming to make a perfect government. I'm not going to succeed if I try. I'm not quite that crazy. I'm pretty ambitious, but not that much. All I'm aiming for is something that at worst is what we have now, and more likely is better. So you raised another issue. Wouldn't this give special interest groups more power? And I would say yes, in a certain sense, and no, in another sense that you have as subtext, which is the problem with special interest groups right now is that they have illegitimate power. They have power that exceeds the actual votes that they represent. They have, for example, suppose a big oil company, gets your money every time you pay for gas, but then it uses your money to, say, support a policy legislatively that would make it easier for them to monopolize the industry. And that's obviously against your interests. However, they can use your money to support that policy. That is illegitimate. Now, on the other hand, Google has a PAC, for instance. Now, if Google used your money to support gay rights or something every time you see ads on their site, that would be wrong. But if Google's employees or people who specifically want to donate to Google's PAC donate to Google's PAC, then that's legitimate use. So I would say, yes, it does improve special interests, and that's a good thing, because this way the EFF gets to wield your votes. And they only get to do that if you support them. The moment they diverge from that, they lose their power. So it just lets you collectivize action. It doesn't take it away, and it doesn't give people more power than they legitimately have. If anything, it counters that, which is a problem in the current system. Anyone else? Yo.
My feeling of democracy now is that we, without information, without real information, and I'm really getting confused about what even reality is anymore, because every source is so biased. You know, if you don't have the information, how do you vote?
No, I agree. So having an informed electorate, right? This is a serious problem, and it's a hard problem. I won't deny that. Now, first off, I would say, like I said, I'm only trying to be better than the current system. So I would encourage you to take a look at how many of your representatives actually read the shit that they sign. Let alone understand the issues that are involved. Like recently, I don't know how many of you watched the SOPA PIPA hearings. One of the senators gets up and proudly says, I am not a geek, I don't understand this stuff. And he's the guy who's voting on it, who's on the select committee specifically charged with being experts on this issue. What the fuck is that, right? So I would say, for one, this diverts votes such that, you know, maybe you don't understand all the details of SOPA PIPA, but you generally agree with the values of the EFF. If you can establish that kind of relationship, you don't have to be an expert on every single issue. The people you delegate to, the people who sort of collect votes, they do. But they only have to be experts on relatively narrow issues. Separately from that, yes, we do have a public education issue, but that's one that we already have.
It's even information, though. Like, say
and you have fact-checking issues.
Okay, there's a threat to us. If we don't do
yes.
this, there's a threat. It's so hard to assess that kind of information.
Yeah, so you have fact-checking issues. All I can say is we're nonpartisan. It's baked into our certificate of incorporation. We would be breaking the law if we were partisan. We want to do fact-checking. It's an interesting problem how you can do fact-checking such that people will trust it, even though, you know, it's going to, sometimes reality has a bias, right? So there's going to be issues there. But we can try, at least. You had a response?
Yeah, just to address that, one of the things I like about the liquid democracy systems is that they allow you to be as empathetic, as uninformed as you want to be. Right now, if you consider, say, the vote for president, which is not quite a popular vote in the United States, but very close to a popular vote. Let's just forget about the electoral college for now. Every person has to be very educated about who should be the next president.
Right.
So in some world where you could delegate your vote, you only need to know that this person is more informed than me and has similar values or has similar interests.
Exactly. That's kind of the magic of the delegation, which is you need to find someone who's more informed or more connected to something and shares your values. And they don't need to be more informed globally. They don't need to be, you know, some kind of crazy super genius politician, right? They just need to be more concentrated than you.
Right now we have a system which implies like everyone has to be...
Right. And it's not viable. Like, I personally, right, like, I'm a fair amount of a policy wonk, and I cannot track every single piece of legislation that's going on. That's crazy. But I trust the EFF. I trust the ACLU.
I don't want to make a speech, but like, there was a great segment on This American Life that talked about this recently where members just can't, like, they don't read the bills because they're lazy. They just can't
it's impossible. No, I mean...
So they delegate the role to their staffs, but sometimes they delegate it to lobbyists too.
Or sometimes they just delegate it to the party, which is essentially like having two proxies at all in the system, right? And that's obviously a worse case scenario than what I'm proposing.
So it's already delegated anyway.
Yeah, exactly. This just makes it open, makes it transparent, and makes it so that you guys can participate, right? I think I have to wrap it up. If you have more questions, I would love to have conversations with you. I'm going to stay for her talk, but I'm going to go outside right after that. Please come talk to me. I camp with Noisebridge, and I'm going to be around, so please come talk to me. Also, shameless plug, I'm doing a meditation workshop, which is at 8 p.m. Every night, which is 30 minutes before sunset. So when you see it getting dark, go to the beach or come find me. And also, I'm giving a talk tomorrow on cognitive psychology, which is at 1 p.m. You know, totally different from this, but I think you'll see some interesting interactions, shall we say. Without further ado.
plugs in the dome do not belong to you. Don't touch them. Don't plug things in. Don't unplug